Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard After Action Report. Today's After Action Report is focused on the battle of 1,000 points of Scions versus Space Marines when I was facing the Knights Astarte with my Inquisitorial Stormtroopers. And yeah, it was, what a battle. Absolutely blistering victory for the Scions. Very convincing win. Only a couple of Marines left on the board by the end of it. So what was the difference between this battle and last battle? That's what we're going to go over. I applied a lot of lessons learned from my first battle when I played 2,000 points of Scions versus Space Marines, and this was a smaller game, but I wanted to try a more maybe controlled environment just to try out to test my theories from the first game, and boy did it work. So just to go over the lists, I thought the Scion list, to look at the differences, no flamers. I dropped all flamers from the list. I dropped grenade launch from the list. It was either you had a melter gun or plasma gun or hotshot lasgun. I did have a couple of hotshot volley guns in there. That's just because I like hotshot volley guns, and that little firebrand squad with 2 hotshot volley guns tends to do okay. The general thinking behind them is they're a good fire support unit, and they can, if needed be, just hide out of line of sight and provide a little bit of covering fire. Just one thing I want to mention is this battle report was pre-chapter approved. So if some of you are thinking the points are a little off, you're probably right. As in, I wasn't paying 17 points per melter gun. So the points might be a little off, so please forgive me for that. It's just because all these battle reports were done over the course of one weekend. Smashed out 3 battle reports in one go. And they were all done before chapter approved. So there you go. So apologies about that, but I just wanted to mention that. But I hope that hopefully it won't really detract overall from the experience of the battle report or the lessons that can be learned from the battle. So the Scion list, I like the 3 Taurox primes. I don't really feel like I need any more. And I like the fact that I had the 2 separate drops now. So essentially how I play the list is I deploy 1 unit on one flank and 2 Tauroxes on another flank, and I drive forward, and generally the Taurox that's on its own, it's a bit of a distraction. It's there to kind of make my opponent deploy a unit further away than he wants to. Didn't really work this game, but it still meant that I had a presence on that flank, which later on in the game became very important. And then the general tactic is obviously I drove forward on the left with my 2 Tauroxes, got my guys out, deep struck down half of my reserves, and then absolutely blasted that flank to pieces. And then when my opponent didn't want to face that firepower again, so he moved onto the other flank where he could see that the lone Taurox prime. He killed that, but then I was like, right, I've got you. Here comes the second wave. I dropped down. I did a lot more damage again. Not quite as much, but I did a lot more damage. My opponent was then able to clear out that flank, but the amount of men and resources it cost him was, by the time he'd cleared that out, turned around, the first wave of Scions had foot slogged it or jeeped it across, Taurox primed it across, and he was facing essentially what was a third wave. So I had an alpha, a beta, and a tertiary strike, a primary, secondary, and tertiary strike, alpha, beta, Charlie strike. I don't know how you want to say it, but I had an alpha and a beta strike, and then by the time, drops, and then by the time he dealt with one of those, turned round, the wave of Scions was upon him. Because Scions are quite cheap. That's the thing. A Scion with a hotshot lasgun is 10 points. If I wanted to, and it would probably be quite effective at 1,000 points, I could just take 100 Scions with lasguns, and the hotshot lasgun. So that, take into account officers, let's say 90 Scions with lasguns. And I could just drop down and first rank fire everything and probably do quite well. So, but that's a different list. So yeah, so I definitely learned I don't want flamers, they're a waste of time. I don't want grenade launchers, they're a waste of time. hotshot volley guns are okay, but it's basically I want las guns or I want plasma or melter guns. How will my list change with chapter approved? It's probably a good question. More than likely, what it will do is I'll drop the 2 hotshot volley guns, which will give me some points, and I'll probably make some of the big sort of 8 or 9, 10-man Scion squads. They're going to be like 7-man squads instead. That should be all the points I really need to drop, and it shouldn't impact on me too much. I might have to get rid of flavorful things like power weapons and stuff as well, but apart from that. So that's on my list to go change chapter approved. The 2-wave theory worked really, really nicely. My dice weren't hot this game. They were just very, very consistent. My luck was not wonky at all. My luck stayed consistent all game, and it made a huge difference. And me and my opponent both, he was like, "Oh, you're rolling so hot," and I was like, "Well, I'm not actually. It's just because you're used to facing Imperial Guardsmen, so I'm getting a lot more hits than I normally would do. I'm putting out the same number of shots because it's all special weapons and stuff, and the las guns are the hotshot las guns are basically special weapons as well. So you're basically just getting hit. When you're getting hit, you're just getting hit hard again and again and again. And thanks to the fact that the majority of the time I'm in half range, I'm getting extra shots. And I was hitting an average number of times. The one thing I might say where my dice were a little hot was I was getting quite a lot of 6s to hit, which were in general letting me get a lot of extra shots. That's the one thing that might be said I was rolling hot about. But generally I didn't skip a beat. I didn't make any mistakes really in that battle. I deployed into alpha strikes. I got back in my transports. I kept moving. I kept rapid deployment. I didn't allow my scions to get picked off at long range like I did in the first game. I was constantly in my opponent's face, constantly had the momentum. At no point in that game did I lose the momentum. That's when scions lose. I have learnt this through tough, harsh defeats, which is when the scions lose the momentum, they lose the game. It's why a lot of people who collect scions say the game seems to go so well for you turns 1 to 2, and then turns 3 seems like nothing much happens, and then you lose it I know so many scion players on forums, just in general in real life, that say the army fails, you can't make it to turn 4 and 5. Not true. You just have to. It's too tempting to deep strike everything in one go. You've got to have an alpha and a base strike. You've got to crush one side, put the voodoo into your opponent, put the heebie-jeebies into your opponent. Psychological warfare. We've talked about this concept of putting the voodoo into your opponent before. I don't know where the phrase came from. It's one that me and my brother came up with. Putting the voodoo into them, making them scared, making them go, "Oh fuck, I don't want to deal with that anymore. Jesus, that's 8 plasma shots, re-rolling 1s to hit, and they're generating more shots because they're in half range. Bloody hell, putting the voodoo into them." And then, so he doesn't go after you, and instead tries to retreat, and then the second alpha strike comes down, and boom, 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 extra voodoo, extra psychological warfare. So yeah, really, really good, really powerful. I feel that's the number one lesson that was on display in that. Forget the list, forget the weapon options, forget the alpha beta strike. The number one thing to take away from that battle, the number one lesson is the momentum. I kept the momentum that entire game. As I said at the beginning of the battle of the video, I said it was very important, and I'll come back to it later. I felt like I was in control of the battle. I felt like I was able to predict and manage the ebb and flow. I was able to manage my opponent. I was able to make him do what I wanted him to do. I wanted him to get scared on one flank, and he would go after the weaker, juicier target, and then sprung a trap for him, took that out. By the time he'd been able to deal with that flank was always sacrificial. I wouldn't say intentionally I put my Warlord over there, because I could have put the other commander over there if I'd wanted. But the fact my Warlord was over there kind of played into my hands, because it meant my opponent really wanted to go for it. He really wanted to kill my Warlord. So, yeah. Little shout out to my opponent, I think, because obviously we've talked a lot of tactics now. We've learnt the lessons. We've gone over what's good. Shout out to my opponent, Sam. Absolutely great player. Despite the fact that he was getting smashed by the Scions, he was, he had no problems. He really great opponent to play against. As you can see by his army, he puts a lot of love and attention into his guys. I mean, he's been playing Warhammer for a few years now. He's only got about 2,000, maybe 3,000 points. I think it's probably about 2,500 to be fair. And that's just because he takes a long time to paint his models. As you can see, every single one of those Knights Astarte was had different heraldry. Every single transport had different heraldry on it, and each one was individually named. The one that was the twin last kind of one, he's done it as a sun. That's a reference to Dark Souls, because he plays Dark Souls. Praise the sun. Yeah, and you think, and it's really, it's like Bretonnians in space. It's like facing Bretonnians in space, and it's really cool. I really like the army. I don't know if it's like mega competitive, to be honest. He hasn't got any Primaris in there or anything, but it's still a good list. It's a solid list. I think it tends to do better at higher points level when he has his list is more focused on, meant to be like 1,000 points of Scions with 1,000 of Skitarii with 1,000 points of Space Marines. And when you have that, the list really bounces well off each other, really well. But overall, I think his list was strong. He had plenty of OBSEC, good balanced list of heavy hit, of elite units and support units and troop units. So I think it was a good take-all-comers list. I think my list was a good take-all-comers list, and I think it just shows the power of the Scions. Does that mean the Scions are invincible? No, not at all. We have seen they're not invincible. And in the hands of many players who aren't used to using them, I would say they're a very hard list to use, very hard to use. When I have lost way more games with my Scions in any edition than I have won with them. But I'm starting to play them a bit more consistently, because they're my best painted guard at the moment. Steel Legion are coming up, so we're going to be seeing lots of Scions on the channel, just because I'm trying to make higher quality battle reports. They're a high quality army. I need to base them, but apart from that, they're pretty good. And so, yeah, I'm getting used to them. I'm starting to get used to how they work, how they function, and every game I use them, they're getting more and more powerful. So hopefully you guys were looking forward to some more pure Scion videos. I'm hoping to have a decent amount of Steel Legion painted up. Next battle report, if it looks okay, the army might not be 100% painted, but it'll definitely be close to 100% painted. We could have 750 points, maybe 1,000 points of Steel Legion, which would be interesting, which would be fun to use. But yeah, that's it. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope some of the lessons I've learned have been useful to you. Tell me what you think about the video. Tell me what you thought about the tactics. Especially what do you think about the alpha and then beta strike, rather than blowing my load all in one go. Instead, being a little bit more tactical about it and having 2 medium drops rather than 1 big drop. Tell me what you think about that. So I hope you enjoyed the battle report. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you guys next time.